Hi, everyone. So glad you're there. It's the Brian Kilmeade Show coming your way after a busy weekend. We have a lot to discuss. Lawrence Jones in studio to do it. Today, the president's going to be having a meeting with Republicans at Doral, his country club, then flying back here to New York City. He's going to be going 100 miles an hour. A lot on his plate, including his economic challenges as well as the war challenges, but he's up for both. Roger Zakheim at the bottom of the hour, Washington director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation Institute, will tap into how Reagan handled the emergence of this Islamic terror regime back in 1980 and how Trump is handling it. Are there similarities? Before we get to Lawrence, let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
For the last 10 days, the Chinese jets and bombers have stopped invading Taiwan's airspace. They're easing back on their aggression because they realize that directly confronting the United States now would be a losing proposition.
Steve Mosher, one of this nation's foremost experts on China, sees a relationship here. China. First off, all roads lead to China, but first it stopped at Panama Canal. How about Cuba now flipping more to a democratic regime? How about Iran being attacked and Venezuela having Maduro ousted? Who does it work against? In every single one of those circumstances, China, as the president gets set to meet with them in China, that's President Xi, in a couple of weeks.
Number 2.
Energy markets are massively well supplied right now. In fact, the run-up in prices has nothing to do with any shortage of barrels of oil or natural gas. It's just fear and perception, the unknown, that this could be some long, drawn-out crisis.
Energy front and center as oil rises to over $100 a barrel. The Trump team has a plan, and the president has demand for oil tankers. Get some guts and go through the Strait, which is behind the whole big price boom.
Number 1.
What we have here is an operation that is what we describe as condition-based. And as the president has said time and time again, if we achieve our goals earlier than planned, fine. If it takes longer, that's also fine.
He's going to finish it through. General Zakheim in on the war planning as well as the advising. War week 1. Major gains as Iran's down to 150 launchers. They name a new leader, and now Israel is looking to target the IRGC as well as the Bashir's forces in the heartland as Tehran is basically on fire. Lawrence, I get the sense the president, after speaking to him last night, really pleased with where things are now.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just him. It's all the analysts that are close to the operation that I speak to off the record. They say this is going actually quicker than they planned. And so I think, for all of those people that thought that they could get in the president's head, especially some that are on the right, to convince the president to hit the brakes and not hit the gas, they were clearly mistaken.
Right, and there's a whole group on the right that's like that.
Exactly.
Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, this is not the president I knew.
Right, and that's why she's not in office anymore.
Well, she's terrible. And she was a big, she's a performance artist. I mean, she wasn't there to legislate. Well, she was there to get famous.
I think one of the things that they have misinterpreted from the president is that although he is against new wars, when it comes to the interests of the country of protecting us, he's going to do the right thing. And I like what the president said. I'm not concerned about the polling on this, even though it looks like it's going to shift. It looks like Americans realize that Iran is a threat. The president's not concerned about any of that. He's concerned about saving lives, and he doesn't feel like the next president would be competent enough to handle this situation.
I saw a letter over the weekend signed by 73 generals in support of this action, one of which, who's been critical in the past, General David Petraeus. He's been very, very good. He's a master tactician, very calm under pressure, got himself into some controversy as CIA director. But I thought he was really good judging by where we're at right now, cut 9.
I think President Trump actually captured it quite well, and I thought he was very forthright in stating that the worst outcome would be that the regime survives and another hardline ideological cleric takes the place of Khamenei. That would be problematic. That would mean that we're going to see this again and perhaps again. That's very challenging for a region which has built its brand around security and great infrastructure and great opportunities, visionary leadership, and so forth. So I think that's a huge concern.
Yeah, I mean, they named his son, the 56-year-old, who seems worse than the grand Ayatollah, now dead at 86. And I just get the sense that this guy's temporary because he's already been wounded once. And I'm convinced the Israelis know how to find these guys.
Well, they continue to monitor them, and it's you made a point this morning, and I actually started to think about it even more. Did they select this guy? I mean, his dad didn't even want him to be the supreme leader. So did they select this guy because they realized that the next supreme leader is going to get canned as well by Israel or the United States? I mean, that could be a possibility. I don't understand why they would pick him. I mean, he is someone that is heavily rooted in ideology, but no one there seems to be a real big fan of him. So why pick him?
So get this. Do you know he's like a real estate magnate? He owns properties across from the Israeli embassy in London. How the hell did he get that sale through? Are you kidding me? This terror regime, you could buy a property across the street from the Israeli embassy?
Also, it didn't seem like, not to be graphic, that he couldn't have children at first. I don't mean him physically, but he couldn't reproduce in the sense that, apparently the Ayatollah wanted him to have legacy. And so he had to go to the UK to get, that looked at afterwards. So that was part of the reason why he wasn't really looked upon very well. They have all these weird rules there. So he's going to have to play ball with the president if he wants to live, essentially.
Right. So here's Mike Leiter about where we're at with this fight, because we need to have this government begin to show cracks. He says the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. sees it. Cut 7.
We're seeing cracks in the edifice of this military security terror regime. They're starting to have very grave difficulties in conveying orders down through the system. There's arguments within the system about the appointment of a successor to the supreme leader. They're having grave difficulties. The fact that they're lashing out irrationally to all of their neighbors and firing these ballistic missiles into all of their neighbors, some 12 countries, into Europe, for crying out loud, is indicative of the fact they're having huge problems. We're having success in these attacks on their command centers.
So that's just it. They're hitting they say go for the heartland where the IRGC headquarters are. They're spread across 31 separate provinces. And then the besieged, which is like Gestapo, but they dressed in flannel shirts and try to blend in, whatever you blend in Iran with. And then you just start killing people. So it's hard to get them, but the Israelis feel confident.
I disagreed on the analysis, though, Brian, that is the view of it being a crack is why they're attacking the Gulf states. I think this is rage. I think that was their strategy. Either you join us, you defend us, or we're going to go after you. And, I think it proves the president's point that if you allow them, not just nuclear weapons, we got to stop limiting the conversation to Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Okay, obviously that's one element. But what about the missiles? Also, what about them radicalizing people, not only in America, in the UK? It's more than just the nukes.
Yeah, I mean, look at this Pakistani guy who's being tried right now in New York City and convicted within 2 hours. He was tried last week. And he was supposed to assassinate Trump. He says he was approached. They said, if you don't do this, you're going to, and by Iranians, we're going to kill your family.
Right.
So next thing you know, he's here recruiting. The FBI gets word, and the FBI pretends that they want to be the assassins. As soon as they get him on tape, they arrest him. But that's what they do. Right. It doesn't come over. They don't necessarily come over as Iranians. They find somebody pliable.
Right. They have a whole strategy. They think through this stuff. And that's why, not going back, not shifting gears a little bit, that's why the Stormer thing never made any sense. It's like you picked
Prime
this
Minister
fight.
Stormer?
Yeah, you picked this fight with the president. All we wanted to do is use the bases to refuel. We didn't even ask. We didn't need your help or your military's help for this fight. We just wanted the base. And now he's talking about sending an aircraft carrier as well. And the president's like, no, thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah, so... And they did talk after that, so I wonder what came out of it. We're sending the George H.W. Bush over there. It should be there shortly. And I asked a high-ranking Pentagon official, I go, why? He goes, just need more firepower. We're ramping it up. So we got about, instead of 40,000, we got 50,000. Now we have another aircraft carrier coming in. So if you're Iran thinking, I'm going to hold on like Saddam did. Saddam lasted another 13 years after Bush 41 left him there because that was his mission. They said if we could survive, then we look like winners.
Right.
Because they don't care about their people.
Which, by the way, is a change of strategy, military strategy. This is why you have a lot of the generals that are honest brokers. This is why they're supporting this. Because before, you didn't have a president that would green light a surge of military power. I mean, people are upset and they're saying, oh, the president and Secretary of War and all of them, they're talking about, and generals are talking about it like a video game. Have you been around troops? They sign up for destruction to do this in the defense of the country. You want battle-tested people that want to go guns blazing, and they're going to show no mercy.
Yeah.
The greatest statement from the Secretary of War is that this is an unfair fight. And we want it that way.
Right, and that's what these guys get. They kept poking the bear and bragging about it since 1979. I saw this morning that there's 2 Americans being held. They got caught as tourists, and they said they're spies, and they're in that Evan prison. And I watched International in the morning, and on Thursday I was listening to these parents talk about they have 2 of their kids in prison in Iran. I go, wait a second. So Stormer's like, whoa, there might not be a legal reason for this war. How about the fact that they've been taking your hostages for 47 years, you idiot? Yeah. Tony Blair said, you got to be with the U.S. Stop with this, go getting a lawyer involved in this.
Who's not a conservative, by the way. I mean, at
Tony
this
Blair
point,
and President Trump get along.
They get along. And you know, he gets which is why, Brian, and you may feel differently, I was shocked by Stormer. Because it seemed like in the UK, in Europe, that they had initially a good relationship. Yeah. And I don't know if it was it the public pressure. By the way, this doesn't seem to be helping him with the public pressure. It seemed like it made it worse. But now he doesn't want to work with the president. You know,
what's so weird is that, people like had a lot of fun saying that they didn't like Trump, okay? Now, go back and forth. Okay, you don't like Trump's approach. Okay, you don't like the dealing with the UK. They were the first one to do a trade deal. So then Europe, it doesn't. But then when it comes to actual war and saying, okay, we're not backing them up and they don't need us, they're looking around saying, how'd that happen?
Yeah.
Because they have about 7 ships. They've let their whole military wither. Yeah. It's embarrassing for this country. They made choices, and now they don't even have the U.S.'s back, and we don't have theirs. So good luck with that. Well, you don't like this leader who got elected twice? Go ahead.
So it's not just the Europeans in that way, Brian, but if you look at the left now, I mean, look at Gavin Newsom's comments concerning the war right there, his comments about Israel, even the governor, Josh Shapiro's comment about Israel. It seems that the left now is not only against this war, but the talking point is that Israel set this up, that the president is taking.
Well, right-wingers saying too,
total
right?
nonsense. Yeah, total nonsense. But at least you have a shunning of those people now. The president has made a hard line. He said, no, actually, no. I don't need them. They're not MAGA.
Well, this is what drove Dan Bongino, and I haven't talked to him since he left the FBI, but I talked to him when he was there, and so do you. This is what drove him nuts. He was wide open to trying to figure out what everybody was up to. He was the first one I know to uncover the whole Russia hoax thing, and he got it there, and he just said, okay, there's things that need to be discussed, and then you want to go ahead and say Israel's behind this. Now, the president said, who you like, MAGA, Israel's not behind it. This is in our interest. Right. You don't believe it. And then Saturday, before the fight, after the war starts on Saturday, the story comes out that Saudi Arabia was pushing the president to act. Right. So wait a second. So Washington Post, who hates Trump every day, right? News column, Saudi Arabia was pushing Trump to act. Don't you know they would love to have written the Israel side of the story?
Right.
So, but instead they do it. But the right-wingers don't, and the left-wingers, or the extremes on both sides, don't want to hear that.
Well, I'm not sure they're even right at this point as far as right-wingers. I mean, it seems like the more and more you look into these people that they have some involvement with the Qataris and all of this like this, where they're the people that once advocated for our most close ally are now taking the position that they need to root for Muslim countries, and the Muslims in these countries and Arab countries are the ones being attacked and taking our side on this. So it's like, what is your vested interest right now? Is it just to be contrarians?
Yeah, so I asked Ambassador Waltz that last night. What are the Arab states, the diplomats, telling you about these attacks? Are they getting nervous? Are they beginning to get shaky? Are they worried about their interceptors running out? Cut 16.
I've met with every one of them, Kuwaiti, Qatari, Emirati, the representative of the Gulf Cooperation Council, Saudi and Jordanian, and so forth. And to a person, there was some expectation that the Iranians would hit back, perhaps targeted on our bases, but they are furious and are beside themselves that the Iranians would dare shoot in all directions and indiscriminately fire drones and missiles into hotels, into tourist sites, into ports, into gas terminals, airports. It's outrageous. It's unacceptable. And look, I'll tell you, just a few months ago, they were not very united. We saw action in Yemen. We saw a lot of disagreement over Sudan.
Yeah, this needed to happen, bro.
Yeah.
This needed to happen because what's been happening behind the scenes for years now is that, at least since the president has been back and doing his first term, is that you have these Gulf states that privately with the president say, hey, they're a problem. They're radicalizing our people. We know what they're doing. And we can't say this publicly, but we'll back you up. Okay. So then the war happens, and then these Gulf states are like, we're not going to get involved. We will actually condemn the United States for being involved with this. And the Iranians goes, no, actually, we don't like it, and starts firing off them. And they're not hitting just military bases. We went over this in our program early this morning. They're going after airports. They're going after hotels. Everything about economic prosperity, they're attacking.
They've hit the desalinization plant in Bahrain. They hit a building in Saudi Arabia where our CIA is housed. They blew up the radar that is helping the missile defense for Qatar. And the only people that could help with that is Russia, and they basically admitted it. The foreign minister admitted Russia is helping us. Lawrence, thanks for helping me.
My pleasure.
I mean, it's a lot.
Not that you need help.
3 hours and 20 minutes of Brian Kilmeade is a lot. I mean, you definitely are. We have psychology money in our medical plan.
After I leave this show, I go
right away.
Right.
All right. Back in a moment. Thanks, Lawrence. Hey, I want to go along there. Coming up next, Roger Zakheim. The big story right now is the market's down 500 points, right? And oil is up over $100 a barrel. The president told me that last night. He said, enough. Strait of Hormuz is safe. I've set up insurance for every tanker. We have knocked out all but 20% of their launchers, and we've sunk their entire Navy. Hey, guys, start going through the Strait of Hormuz. The ramifications of not going through is an overreaction by the global markets, causing the barrel to go up, helping countries like Russia profit more, which doesn't help anybody. I do think it's all temporary anyway, but the president really determined, show some guts, get to it. We're doing this war against a terrorist state that's been terrorizing everybody, so suck it up and at the very least, put your oil in play.
It's quite remarkable how close to the plan that we are executing, and with stunning results, to be quite frank about it. And I'm not exaggerating at all here, as you well know. I mean, the facts really do speak for themselves. Just to remind our audience, what we have here is an operation that is what we describe as condition-based. In other words, we have goals and objectives we're going to achieve. They're not sensitive to time. They're sensitive to the achievement of those goals. And as the president has said time and time again, if we achieve our goals earlier than planned, fine. If it takes longer, that's also fine. We're not going to stop until we achieve our goals.
And that is General Keane not talking just as a great analyst with a lot of experience. He's very tapped into the Pentagon right now, as well as the administration. The president feels very secure with him around, and he should. And I think he's going to be joining the Senate Leadership Committee, I think, providing military advice to the Senate Armed Services and Foreign Relations. Joining us now is Roger Zakheim. Roger is the Washington director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation Institute. Roger, one of the first presidents to get offensive with Iran, this new Iran after the revolution, was Ronald Reagan. From what you did, from the years of study and from studying his work and beliefs, how do you think he would feel about Donald Trump's mission to finally defang this regime?
I think he would see it as finishing the work that he began. absolutely essential. This is peace through strength, and occasionally you need to use strength and exercise that strength in order to realize a true peace. That's what President Reagan sought to do. I mean, that was the moment where we saw the earliest evidence of the reach, danger, and kind of toxic ideology that this regime puts forward. I'm talking about the attacks on the Marine barracks in Lebanon, which was one of Hezbollah's first acts against U.S. interests. So I think what we're seeing right now is a culmination of that peace through strength pursuit to really take down and collapse this regime, which is the only way we're going to move beyond 47 years of constant attack from Tehran.
I mean, it's amazing because in '83, do you think that we ever fully responded to that barracks bombing?
Well, we started it, but the answer is no. And we've paid the price, actually, in the decades since. And no president has responded in the way that was required until President Trump began this operation. Started June in 2025. And now with Operation Epic Fury. I mean, this is essential. I think what we're seeing here, Brian, this is what's so essential for everyone to understand. And this is part of what General Keane, I've served on that commission with him twice. I mean, he is very much the leader and strategist that you described him to be, is that we're seeing the beginning of the end of this regime. We hadn't seen that until now. What's happened in March of 2026 as a result of Operation Epic Fury is the beginning of the end of this regime.
And they had goals to dominate this entire region. Just go back 5 years ago. They were controlling Syria. Hezbollah had tens of thousands of missiles ready, aimed at Israel. And then Hamas was fomenting and drawing up an epic plan October 7th to put all types of, to kill over 1,200 Israelis, most of which were innocent, who were just sitting there and wait. And Iran was behind all of that. And now the Houthi rebels, who are also one of their surrogates, have been mysteriously quiet in these moments. They've lost Syria. Hezbollah is flat on its back. Hamas is taking its last breath, especially if the financing stops. And all the Arab states seem to agree that Iran's the problem. That goes from tentacles everywhere to isolated.
Well, they had perfected their ring of fire. They had really been the leading state sponsor of terror. We use that word, but actually we saw how lethal it was, because in every region of the world, actually, you had their reach, and certainly surrounding Israel in the way that you just described with all of their terrorist proxies. Really, I mean, until October 7th, they were at the height of their power and influence, and now they are completely defanged. We are seeing such a great degradation of their power. 90% of their missile capacity has been reduced in terms of their launches, 80% in terms of their drone launches since the beginning of Operation Epic Fury. And that was just phase one. As General Keane was referencing, we're on to phase two, where we're taking out their production capacity. We are punishing this regime for that ring of fire that sought so much instability, death, and destruction in the Middle East and against our interests.
So just go to show you, to me, it's so obvious when 7 presidents have to deal with this, from Carter to Reagan to Obama and Clinton, all dealing with Iran. How you deal with it. You know, Barack Obama said the problem are the Sunni nations. So we're going to do a JCPOA, and we're going to unfreeze their funds and deliver pallets of their cash in our currency to their country. And JCPOA couldn't even get Democratic support in the Senate. President Trump rips it up, and Joe Biden looks the other way as they sell millions of barrels of oil a day illicitly through ghost ships, mostly to Iran, to the rest of the world, to sustain and reinvigorate their country and help perpetrate these horrific October 7th attacks. So then you have this president come in hard. But among the people, what I'm most astounded by is that Democrats and Republicans know the danger of Iran, but yet they're pretending that there is no danger. Listen to Chris Murphy, cut 20, the Democrat senator from Connecticut.
This is already a war that is becoming an ongoing disaster. It gets worse if the president is talking about putting ground forces in. You're talking at that point about dozens, if not hundreds, of new American casualties. I think this administration just fails to understand how to achieve any of their objectives. So their objectives shift by the minute. Sometimes we're pursuing regime change, sometimes we're not.
So, I mean, does he believe what he's saying?
No idea. I don't know what he's watching. He's in some sort of alternate universe in terms of that assessment that's going on. We have defanged the Iranian regime militarily. We are now going after their industrial capacity, which over the coming days will also be severely. And what you're doing with that, Brian, is now buying not just years, but perhaps decades before they can rebuild. We have air, not just superiority, supremacy. We're doing it with a remarkable ally. Again, years of cooperation. The strategic orientation of the Democrats, the JCPOA, as you referenced, was looking at Iran in the way they wanted Iran to be, not with the way Iran was acting. They were not dealing with reality. That was the failure. How could you make an agreement with the regime without talking about their ballistic missile programs? How could you make an agreement with the regime without talking about their terrorist proxies? The whole orientation showed that they had a fundamental misunderstanding of who they were, not President Trump. He did in his first term. He's finishing off in the second term. And as a result, he's actually redrawn the map of the Middle East in a way that complements our interests and our safety. We'll see if the regime crumbles in the coming days or weeks, but no doubt in my mind, Brian, as I said a moment ago, this is the beginning of the end of the regime, and that will have a fundamental impact on U.S. national security, not just in the Middle East, but around the world.
I was talking to high-ranking Pentagon officials over the weekend, and they said they think 2 weeks. You'll see cracks amongst the IRGC, the Basij, and what's left of the new supreme leader. But I want you to hear Bill Maher, who is remarkably refreshing to listen to. Obviously, he's a liberal. He says, I'm a liberal Democrat. I'm almost never going to vote for a Republican. But Adam Schiff is on with him. And listen to this, cut 22.
This statement from the administration: the president had the constitutional authority to direct the use of military force because he could reasonably determine that such use of force was in the national interest. That's too vague for you?
Totally vague.
Okay, because that's from Obama about Libya.
And he goes on. He goes on a little bit longer. And he goes on to say this, cut 23.
This week, war. Did you hear about that thing? We bombed Iran, and it's going on. Now, have you expected me to say I hate it? I don't. Sorry. When he puts boots on the ground, yeah, then I'll hate it. Now, I know too many happy Iranian Americans. Sorry. You cannot name one horrible thing that has happened in the Middle East in the last 50 years and not connect it to this fascist theocracy.
Right. And guess what? Warner knows this. Murphy knows this. Kelly knows this. These are people that have been briefed at the highest level. That's what's so different now. Well, I mean, Sam Nunn, who's a Democrat, would never have said Iran's not a problem, not the objective. He might, they'll object to maybe methods and practices, but never would have done stuff like this. But now you can't get a Democrat outside Fetterman to see the danger of Iran all of a sudden.
Brian, the derangement syndrome runs very, very deep. And in case you doubted it, somehow thought there was sort of a principled, strategic sort of orientation driving this point of view, just listen to those clips. It's clear. It's clear here that they cannot see anything good coming out of this administration from something President Trump is doing. But here's the most important part, is that President Trump is in year 2 of his administration. It's 3 years left. What the Iranian regime has done for decades is bet that the next administration, the next office holder, the next policymaker will just move on and try a different strategy. President Trump will not let these guys off the hook, and he's got a 3-year runway to make him know that. And I think whether it's days and weeks, like you just said, or longer, this regime is going to crumble.
Yes, I 100% agree. And the rest of these other countries are focusing more on their economy and, yes, partnership with Israel than Iran. Do you notice none of these Arab states are blaming Israel? None of them, right? I mean, they're blaming Iran, which is a relief and brand new. So, Roger, tell me if you see a parallel. There was a thought that Ronald Reagan was a warmonger. Remember, he had that radio address where while they were still recording, before they started taping, commenced bombing on the Soviet Union, and that got out. And it really worked to his advantage. Like, we don't know this guy. This actor, politician, this right-winger, we don't know about this guy. He doesn't want to talk to the Russians, the Soviets in the beginning. I don't know. I'm not necessarily interested in a new missile deal. It threw people off. Donald Trump has everyone knocked off their axis. They have no idea whether it's Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, President Xi in China, the new Cuban leadership. Obviously, they misjudged him again in Iran and feeling free to be shoulder to shoulder with Netanyahu. The rest of the world does not know what to make of Trump, but they got to deal with them because of our economy and our military.
And that they know his intent here, that he will do what he says, and he's not bounded by any sort of political orthodoxy or political restraint. This is a president who talks about peace through strength, but it's not the sort of peace that, you think about where, hey, we're just going to submit and negotiate our way out of it. He's willing to put the pressure on. He's willing to use military power to realize true peace. President Trump, at the end of this month, is scheduled to meet with President Xi in China. He just referenced the People's Republic of China. Xi has never seen a more powerful U.S. president that he's had to contend with. And that's because of the things you just described. Venezuela, what's happening in Iran, the pressure on Cuba, right? Getting European allies in Europe to step up and make those commitments. The United States is going into negotiation with China more powerful than it's been in decades.
Right. And if you could argue that all these things he's doing is really combating China, where some on the right, you know them too, keep saying, what about America first? China's the big problem. Take a deep breath and maybe give the president a little credit that he agrees with you, and that's exactly what he's doing. Steve Moshe weighed in on this. He's one of, I think, this country's foremost expert in China, wrote about 6 books on them, and sees this as all about China. Cut 39.
For the last 10 days, the Chinese jets and bombers have stopped invading Taiwan's airspace. Before that, they were sending over dozens of planes every couple of days to harass that independent country. They were sailing ships around Taiwan to suggest that they were going to put a blockade on the country. I don't know why they've stopped. Are they starting to think about conserving fuel? You can't run ships on solar panels and you can't run planes on windmills. Or are they just trying to be nice to Trump before he visits Beijing? And I think they're easing back on their aggression because they realize that directly confronting the United States now would be a losing proposition. You mentioned Chinese radars and anti-air defenses that fail to even not just deter, but even detect the U.S. attacks. Well, everyone who owns said systems now realize that they are useless against the U.S. military.
Maybe even Turkey that took them as missile defense, even though they're a member of NATO. But your thoughts on what he said and how what he's doing with Venezuela, Cuba, Argentina, Panama, and the Canal, and now Iran affects China negatively?
President Xi knows that his biggest vulnerability is that he's got an untested military. The command and control is top down, doesn't know that they can operate successfully, haven't fought wars, and certainly haven't won one. As a result, they look at the United States just in this past year plus alone and sees the most lethal fighting force that can carry out operations around the globe efficiently, with lethality, and realize their military objectives. Yeah, so I would think you could connect the dots between what's happening with Operation Epic Fury and what is not happening right now in terms of the intimidation of Taiwan. I think it all accrues to our benefit. The one area of vulnerability we have, which is how long can we carry out an operation, sustain operation? Do we have sort of the magazine depth, as it were, to sustain operation for weeks or months? President Trump's getting after that as well, pushing forward a $1.5 trillion budget, right? And making sure he's met with our industry leaders to get the production going. It should have happened earlier. It's happening now. That also is a signal to Beijing. President Xi knows that the United States is getting ready, is more ready than Xi is to deal with the Taiwan contingency.
And there's an all hands on deck push to get rare earth, whether it's our own or whether it's our allies. So the president knows that's his vulnerability. Someday people appreciate it, just like Reagan. They kept saying negative things about him all the time through my entire youth. And then next thing you know, people realize we're going to name the airport on him. We're going to celebrate him. And he's listed as one of the all-time great presidents. But maybe not in his day. Maybe not while he served. But once he left, people really felt the ripple of what he did.
Winning has an impact, Brian. And people in America and around the world appreciate peace, true peace and prosperity and freedom. And that's why you have those things you just described.
Roger Zakheim, Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation over in Washington. Thanks so much, Roger. We're back in a moment. Brian Kilmeade Show. Hey, we are back, and there is so much going on right now, but there's no doubt about it. The economy matters, and the president, as much as he cares about the dollars and the market and the economy, and that's got to be his message for the midterms, In the big picture, killing off Iran's government is worth it. But right now, it is a bloodbath. So the market's down. Now they're down to 46,000. Lost 678, 79, going up and down, but mostly down. Why? Because the price of oil has gone up per barrel to over $100. But here's what Trump also knows. When this comes to a close and when there's somebody else in charge, and it's probably at the end of next week or the week after, this thing's going to rocket right back up. Because not only will you have a Middle East no longer in turmoil, you'll have one that is really free from additional turmoil. So forecasts will be up. Here's what really is maddening to me as someone who doesn't do this for a living. We all have plenty of oil and gas. There's plenty of oil and gas on the world market. It's all projections about the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the oil flows through, right? And I think the majority, 58% of China's oil flows through. But the president told me last night, he said, write this down, Brian. You could say this. He said, tell everyone to show some guts. Get those freighters, get those tankers, and roll through the Strait of Hormuz. We've sunk their entire Navy, taken out all but 20% of their launchers, and they don't have the ability to make new rockets and missiles. So don't bring the economy to its knees for no reason. That's the world economy. Simple message. With us right now is Michael Goodwin from the New York Post. Michael, was this an operation that the president needed to do?
No, he didn't need to do it, Brian, but I think that does not detract from the fact of how important it is. And when I wrote about the kind of righteousness of this attack, I'm thinking of the 47 years of oppression, of murder, of gangsterism that the Iranian regime represented. I mean, it killed so many Americans, and of course, it basically imprisoned its own country. I mean, 90 million Iranians. And you think of how they use Hezbollah in Lebanon, right? Really taking over much of that country. Hamas, of course, all the other proxies that it funded and helped direct, the damage it did in Syria and around the world. So this really does, I think, lift the yoke of theocracy off the Iranian people, but it also changes the region, and therefore I think it changes the world. I mean, at some point, presumably, when this is over, the oil will come back on the global market because now it's sanctioned. So I think there are all kinds of positive outcomes possible for the people of the region and, frankly, for the whole world in having a free Iran.
Yeah, and the president looks like he's going to finish it off. But you write about the links. They actually had a memorial service for the death of the grand for the Ayatollah, and you mentioned the links with the DSA, the Socialists of America. What do they see eye to eye with the Islamic extremists?
I think it's hating America. I think that's the link. I mean, there's no other explanation. How could you, if you were rallying and campaigning in America for more socialism, how could you support the authoritarianism that squeezed the life out of an entire region for purposes of what? I mean, I don't think a lot of these people rallying for the Ayatollah in New York are necessarily Islamists. I think they're just misguided leftists who anything that's against America, they're for it.
Are you surprised that the Gulf states have rallied around like they have? Here's Ambassador Walt saying they have not taken a backward step, even though they've been targeted every day. Cut 16.
I've met with every one of them, Kuwaiti, Qatari, Emirati, the representative of the Gulf Cooperation Council, Saudi and Jordanian, so forth. And to a person, there was some expectation that The Iranians would hit back, perhaps targeted on our bases, but they are furious and are beside themselves that the Iranians would dare shoot in all directions and indiscriminately fire drones and missiles into hotels, into tourist sites, into ports, into gas terminals, airports. It's outrageous. It's unacceptable. And look, I'll tell you, just a few months ago, they were not very united. We saw action in Yemen. We saw a lot of disagreement over Sudan.
So you see it much different now. I
think this event, Brian, has long-range consequences about reshaping geopolitics. Of course, these Arab countries are our allies too, but it does draw them closer to Israel. So I think what Iran has done here is a great mistake, as it's sort of going out of business sale. It's selling everything at rock-bottom prices, including all of its alliances and potential alliances. I think this does show the true color of this regime.
I want to talk about what happened in New York City. Saturday and Sunday, they found IEDs. They found 2 militants, Turkish, one Afghanistan heritage, who had went to both those countries before, an 18 and 19-year-old. This is Jessica Tisch, Cut 44, the police commissioner.
A counter-protester identified as Amir Balat, an 18-year-old man, lit and threw an ignited device toward the protest area, landing in the crosswalk of East 87th Street and East End Avenue. Witnesses reported seeing flames and smoke as it traveled through the air before it struck a barrier and extinguished itself a few feet from police officers.
So that's a little about what happened. These guys tried to get away. They couldn't. Thankfully. There was one protest against the Muslim call to prayer, and there was one for Muslims, and then they have these 2 alleged terrorists jump in between. What does it show you?
Well, look, I think it does show that the extremists are being attracted to this moment, that the extremists who want to defend the Ayatollah and hate America, hate Israel. Brian, I think one of the outcomes of this whole event is that Israel is clearly America's most important and reliable ally. And of course, both countries are being attacked by the left and some on the right. The anti-Semitism is spiraling again. But I think this is an important moment to see who your friends are. And the European powers are doing nothing about this. I mean, this is quite a moment of reshaping a lot of geopolitics.
Yeah, here's more from Jessica Tisch on what else she found in those bombs, the commissioner, Cut 46.
The bomb squad responded and examined the devices. Based on preliminary examination and X-ray imaging, the devices, which were a bit smaller than a football, appear to be a jar wrapped in black tape, importantly with nuts, bolts, and screws, along with a hobby fuse that could be lit. At this time, we do not yet know whether the devices were functional improvised explosive devices or hoax devices, because we don't yet know if there was energetic material contained in them.
They later found not a hoax, not a smoke bomb. It was legitimate.
Yeah, I think that's a chilling experience, Brian. And of course, I do think we're talking about the police commissioner, but where is the mayor? This is something for the mayor. Where is the governor? Where's Chuck Schumer, right? They've been condemning the Iran attack, but they're not condemning this. This is what's happened to the left. It's become totally unmoored from any domestic issue, and it just hates Donald Trump. Whatever he's for, they're reflexively against, and they cannot separate the good from the evil. It's really quite striking.
It is. That's why Trump says, I don't know what's coming after me, so I'm going to fix everything I can because no one else will do it. He's 100% right. It would have been too much of a political risk before the midterms if you only cared about politics. But he's like, I'm going to bet on myself and my military. And I think he's going to. We'll be talking next week. And I think he's going to be saying, I made the right move. They're going to begin to break. That's what their prediction is. The break will start showing next week. Michael Goodwin, final thought?
Yes, I think that's good news because time is not on the president's side politically. Nonetheless, I think this had to be done. It should have been done years ago by other presidents, but they all accepted it as something that couldn't be changed. Thankfully, Donald Trump did not see it that way, and this has changed not only that region, but I think it's changed world politics in some big ways.
All right. Thanks so much, Michael Goodwin from the New York Post. Appreciate it. When we come back, your first opportunity to get some calls in, 1-866-408-7669. We're following the breaking news in New York City, absolutely, especially because the mayor has just spoke. And, of course, he called out the people that protest against the Muslims and the call to prayer. Not really, besides saying that there's no act for terror. Why not just call it the Islamic extremists? Because it's Mayor Mamdani. That's the answer. But what do you think? Don't move.
Warner Brothers World Abu Dhabi is officially developing Harry Potter-themed land in the United Arab Emirates. So hopefully they know the spell for Missalum Deflectus.
So that is the cold open. I like the cold open wasn't bad with Pete the other day because it does talk about how Pete is so direct and everything. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War. But for the most part, you have nobody on the other side there. But it's kind of interesting. 1-866-408-7669. So Bill Maher, somebody on the left who has no problem looking at Iran and seeing evil, and that's what most on the left really feel. But when they get in front of the cameras, Donald Trump doesn't know what he's doing. Cut 24 is more from Bill Maher.
I just don't get what liberals don't get about liberation. I see so much happiness. I see it in Venezuela. I see it here in Iran. Could we skip the part where we talk about, they had so many different reasons for going to war, regime change, and we got to get rid of the nukes, and they were supporters of terrorism. It's all of it. How about this? This was a fascist theocracy, and nothing in the Middle East was ever going to get better while they were still there everything up.
And then this was the time. They've never been more vulnerable a year after taking down their missile defense. No doubt Israel was going to act, but there's no doubt we had to act. So if Donald Trump floats through and gets his 3 years done and they go, wow, what a foreign policy. But they said, wait a second, in retrospect, you watched Iran build up his ballistic missile stock. You saw that they had uranium to make 11 bombs. You were briefed that by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and you did nothing. So, and I think I mentioned this on Friday. The one thing that the President Bush got, and by the way, I'm so tired of people putting down President Bush. President Bush had the most experienced national security staff around him possible, that they all didn't agree. You had Rumsfeld, you had Colin Powell, you had Dick Cheney. They had 40 years of experience in that region especially. And if you don't like that deal, what they said is we're going to pick one reason for Saddam Hussein, not the making a mockery of the oil for food program, not the torturing of his own people, not the weapons of mass destruction that were found after the first Persian Gulf War. He said, they kicked out our inspectors. They won't let us see these sites. Our weapons inspectors really believe that he's got nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction there, chemical, biological. And then when asked, they kicked him out. They kicked out all the inspectors, and they said, don't come here anymore. President Bush gave him another shot. When they finally went in and was able to get rid of the regime, they didn't find weapons of mass destruction. They said, you went in under false purposes. So in a way, Donald Trump learned from that. What do you want to do? Ballistic missiles is one. Yeah. Okay. Is that the reason? Nope. Nuclear weapons. Did you change your reason? No, nuclear. There's a problem. Didn't you obliterate it? Yeah, but not totally. And they're rebuilding 2 sites. What about harassing your neighbors? That's another one. Harassing your neighbors. Absolutely. And what about abusing their own people? Yep. That's another. Well, Donald Trump is all over the place. No, it's all of them. That's what Bill Maher pointed out. It's everything. So he could just say, well, here's a full screen. Here are the 5 reasons why we're going in. And then someone will say, well, why now? Well, if we waited longer, they'd just build up missile defense. And maybe the foreign minister will say, no, we weren't. But they were. This was the time to go in. But you can't get a Democrat to admit that. I mean, John Fetterman is like Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin, 5% of the time, would think like a moderate Republican. But a moderate Republican, for some reason, has no place now. They say Tom Suozzi, who's got, I think, my district on Long Island, is moderate Republican. I don't know. I don't see that much. I really don't. Here's an example of the media jumping away from Trump. Cut 18.
They bombed a submarine and just let the sailors drown to death. Going again, even the Nazis didn't do that during World War II, apparently. Even the Nazis collected people from the water.
This unprecedented joint US-Israeli war on Iran, it's fair to say, has stirred mostly opposition, fear, and concern around the world.
A lack of really any clear articulation of strategy, constantly shifting aims from the president, from the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Rubio.
Once you go to regime change from the air, which cannot be achieved, you're setting up the military not only to fail, but we as a country will have failed.
Rahm Emanuel, you know better. You were chief of staff for Barack Obama. I know you guys made decisions to go for the JCPOA. I'm not sure if you were still there when they decided to draw that up. I think you were only there for 2 years, and they did Obamacare, and you told them not to. That's what I'd be hanging my hat on. But if I were you, I would just keep my powder dry here. You're too experienced. If you want to come off as the moderate, don't just line up with Chris Murphy and the extremists. But not that you're taking ideas and advice from me. But you're trying to run for president. You do have a habit of achieving a lot of your goals. You had ambassador to Japan, failed mayor, but better than the last 2 mayors in Chicago. And you're very formidable operative and chief of staff for Obama and Clinton. So why are you getting your hands dirty in Iran? Just admit it's going to work out.
People ask boots on the ground, no boots on the ground, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, go in, go in. President Trump knows, I know, you don't tell the enemy, you don't tell the press, you don't tell anybody what your limits would be on an operation. We're willing to go as far as we need to in order to be successful. We would be completely unwise if we did not reserve the right to take any particular option, whether it included boots on the ground or no boots on the ground.
60 Minutes sat down with the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, where he's talked about the operation as it's going so far. You know, keep in mind, we're only a weekend. And what is possible 1 weekend with the firepower of 3,000 separate sites, and then, of course, probably 3,000 separate sites with Israel, and blowing up all but 150, 125 launchers. They think less than 125 launchers. And they have the inability right now to come up and manufacture new missiles, new launchers. They said there's no way they could do it. So no, when they take them out, you're not going to be able to rebuild them or get them in. And there's not many people being able to deliver anything to Iran these days. So let's bring in Vice Admiral Robert Harward, the senior advisor with the Iran Policy Project at the Jewish Institute for National Security of America. Admiral, welcome back.
Hey, Brian, good to be with you.
Admiral, it seems like they're going to really be targeting this week. They're going to be targeting the IRGC and the 32 provinces, as well as the besieged. And as I mentioned to you last night on One Nation, this will be a little bit harder, but I think they'll rely more on what the intelligence they have through what the Israelis have done over the last decades on the ground, right?
Brian, I think that's exactly right. But I would also, let's take one step back from that. Yeah, the IRGC, the Artish, all those guys, those are targets, no doubt, especially if you're going for a regime change, which you have to do. But if we can eradicate the missiles, and I think they're almost at that tipping point now, to provide safe passage of ships through the Straits of Hormuz, then we could take all the time in the world. And I think that's where we're going to turn the corner this week. We've got, U.S. Navy ships have the best anti-cruise, anti-drone weapon systems in the world on them. They've had them for 40 years. It's called a close-in weapon system, and it basically tracks the drone or the missile and shoots it down, firing about 3,000 rounds a minute, 50 rounds a second. So passage of ships through the Gulf and then eradicating of those missiles gives us all the time in the world to go after the IRGC. And we will go after the IRGC. There's no doubt about it. So I think they're both similar missions. It's kind of your strategy of which should come first and how you do that.
The president said, listen, show some guts, go through there now, send the tankers through now. What do you say?
I say do it, but let's escort them. Let's give them
Is
the
that
protection
possible,
they're
Admiral?
due.
Do we have enough ships to escort all these tankers? I mean, I looked at some of those traffic patterns. You do?
No, listen, we have combat systems that can help provide protection to those ships. And I think that's important. But at the same time, if you eradicate those short-range ballistic missiles, the other missiles, and the drones that can endanger them, and that's where I think we're tipping the point. If you take care of that, then they don't need escorts. But as a security measure, take a few of our guided missile destroyers. Other ships are equipped with CIWS to provide that sort of security in the interim till we know we've completely shut down missile threats to those and the Navy threats.
So when you talk to your buddies who are still active in the military, what do they tell you about the execution of this mission so far?
They're all very excited about it. This is a real display of their what they've trained for, what they're prepared for, our ability to strike anywhere and everywhere we want, our ability to defend with our interceptors. Everybody's very proud of this mission they've taken on. They're realizing their purpose in serving.
George H.W. Bush, the aircraft carrier, is now pulling in. So a third aircraft carrier. I know it brings firepower. Does that have a specialty, though? The George H.W. Bush?
Sure, they've got aircraft that can watch the waterways, aircraft that can see. So it's beyond just the firepower. There's a whole plethora of other capability it brings into the theater and capacity in those realms. So if you got 4 carriers, you can combat air patrol incessantly. You can have eyes in the sky incessantly. So it adds to the capacity and the rate of which we can deliver ordnance and target things.
All right, so looking at the new leader, the son of the old leader, this is a guy that was not going to get the nod when his dad was in power. It didn't seem. They said it was anything but certain that he'd be in. But by most accounts, this guy's more bloodthirsty and ruthless and relentless than his 86-year-old now dead father, right?
Brian, all of that is true. But let's think of one thing. If you look at our history, what we did with Al-Qaeda, what we've done with others, is that a job you want right now? Because that makes him target number one. And so just like Iranian nuclear scientists a couple of years ago when they were going after, if you were a nuclear scientist, you said, I'm in charge, your life expectancy was very short. I would suggest this guy's life expectancy is very short, and appropriately so. If you really want to convince people this is not the career, you don't want to be a part of this regime, make sure the leadership, every time they're identified, goes away.
And you think we're in the process of doing that?
Well, I'm sure we're looking. I'm sure they got him hidden away somewhere. I don't think he's going to be effective. This is all part of this significant IO campaign. Hey, we've got a new leader. Okay, fine. What's he going to do? He's a target now. So, yes, I would hope we're doing that.
So, Admiral, what's your take on the president getting on camera and saying, I don't mean to target any of the Arab states, any of the Gulf states, you're our friends, and then gets rebuked by the IRGC saying essentially, no, yes, we do. We want to target them. And then he comes back and says, well, you have bases. Any country with American bases, you can target. What does that tell you about the lack of togetherness?
This is all about information operations, waving the narrative. And don't forget, we've always said that the GCC before this started said, hey, we don't want you to strike, because they knew this was a risk. So there is, and as I've seen from all the leaders in the region, His Excellency or His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, they're committed to defending their countries. And so I think this just adds to the problems Iran's facing and the desire of all of them to see a government in Iran that is not going to be a threat to them. So we have an obligation as part of that defense, but I think everyone's committed to a long-term security and stability, and that's going to involve a change of government in Tehran.
So the president said to me last night, he said, I go, can I quote you on this? He said, yeah, you can. He said they found intelligence of this. Iran had thousands of missiles pointed at all these Middle Eastern countries for the last 4 months. They were going to take over the Middle East. They were going to control all of UAE, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia. They had 1,200 missiles pointed at these countries. All these nations were afraid, but they're not anymore. They had a reason to be afraid. We have knocked the hell out of them that no other nation could have, and they still have remnants left. But he said that the plan was for them to gradually assert themselves throughout the Middle East. And Qatar has no military per se, Oman, Saudi Arabia, but they have a lot of riches and assets. So your thought about what the president presented out there, and the fact is, somebody's telling him where to shoot right now.
Look, anyone who's been watching this on the long haul, this regime from its inception had much greater ambitions. They wanted to establish the Islamic Republic and then proliferate it throughout the region. So if you were Qatar, you were UAE, you were Saudi, who allowed secular, believed in the choice of religion, provided for its people, you were a threat to Iran. So sure, ultimately they were going to go after that, if not by missiles, by owning a nuclear weapon. So there was a tipping point where we could no longer affect that. I think the timing on this is brilliant, because that point where we could not affect it could have been less than a year, if shorter out. So I think you had to act, and the timing is perfect. And it has even broader ramifications than that, Brian, as you're well aware. What does this mean to Russia? What does this mean to China? What does this mean to Europe? So I think the timing had to occur when it is now, because we were rapidly reaching that tipping point where Iran could not be challenged.
And yeah, now I think after last year, when the Israelis took out their missile defense at great cost, and then we blew up their nuclear program, that put a clock on whether we were going to actually try to finish them off or not, didn't it? Because if they were allowed to get new S-300s or whatever they had, the next incarnation, and rebuild and continue to build 500 missiles a month that they were doing, between 2 and 500, it would make it really tough to do this again, or for the next guy.
Well, Brian, you go to the point of what is the ultimate end game. And the end game is a government that's looking after its people and will not threaten the regional actors. And so I think you've hit it. That's what the ultimate end state is. And I don't think we should ever lose sight of that. If not, you allow Khamenei or someone to reconstitute the government, they'll just go back in the same practice. They'll reconstitute their nuclear program, reconstitute their missiles, reconstitute drones. So the government is the key to all this, and I believe the ultimate end state. That'll be acceptable to us, Israel, and the other GCC partners in the region.
So what is the mood on the ground? I ask you this every time because you used to live there. Do you have a sense of what the mood on the ground is right now?
Everybody's sitting on edge, waiting for that tipping point where the people can be positioned and are not threatened, can overcome the threat against them. So there's an internal and external, and both are on that tipping point of turning the corner. I just hope it's sooner instead of later to avoid as much bloodshed as possible.
Right. If they actually, you got to get rid of the besieged, you got to get rid of what's left of the IRGC, and then see if you can organize some type of resistance, and then see if there's an interim leader there that you could deal with. Because we do not want to get on the ground and deliver the mail and pick up the garbage. That's something the president is determined not to do, right?
I don't think we have to.
No.
We just have to get to that point where they can't project power. And once we've done that, then we can focus on eradicating the internal power to threaten its people. So to me, it's inevitable. It's staying ahead of this IO battle we're in and setting the conditions for that to occur internally.
Right. I think the one thing, if you could take the pressure off economically with the escorting of ships or start using the Strait of Hormuz for whatever reason, that would focus more on the operation itself. But we all know that the midterm election is going to be determined by the economy, but it's further enough out where the president hopefully can finish the job. If I asked some of the people, I asked some people in the know, what are the Gulf states worried about? Instead of saying they're worried about Iran or being associated with Israel, they said, we're worried about America leaving early. They're worried about us leaving before the job is done. Are you worried about that?
Well, I remember when President Obama, as one of his first policy statements, was pivot to the Pacific. And that basically meant we were leaving the region. And we saw what that did for over a decade. So I think when the president came into this administration, he made it very clear that we were going to be a role, we were involved, we were back. And that's been a very welcomed message from our partners in the region. Now, I think they know now this is very clear. We're committed to them their security, their defense, and stability in the region.
Admiral Robert Harward, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right, good to be with you.
All right, back in a moment.
The bomb squad responded and examined the devices. Based on preliminary examination and X-ray imaging, the devices, which were a bit smaller than a football, appear to be a jar wrapped in black tape, importantly with nuts, bolts, and screws, along with a hobby fuse that could be lit. At this time, we do not yet know whether the devices were functional improvised explosive devices or hoax devices, because we don't yet know if there was energetic material contained in them.
So that is Jessica Tisch, the very capable police commissioner of New York City, talking about 18-year-old Amir Ballat and 19-year-old Ibrahim Kahumi, who are U.S. citizens from Pennsylvania. Their parents are naturalized citizens from Turkey and Afghanistan. Already looking into their background, visited Turkey multiple times. Afghanistan, we know, birthplace of most terror. And we know that they were up and around trying to do things the same. They were inspired by ISIS, which is, by the way, not to get you too confused, but Iran hates ISIS. ISIS hates Iran. They basically fought against each other and in order to push ISIS out because they were about to take Baghdad. And Iranian forces came in and pushed ISIS back. And since that time, Trump came in and just blew ISIS up, even though they're trying to make a comeback. So a clash broke out between the anti-Muslim protesters and counter anti-Nazi protesters Saturday afternoon right by the mayor's home. Local reports say the mayor and his wife were home at the time. Andami responded by saying violence at a protest is never acceptable. Authorities came, and then the bomb squad conducted a preliminary analysis of the device, and it looks pretty serious. It looks like something, according to the Joint Terrorist Task Force, that you would have to learn overseas, something more typical of that. So in New York City, just when you think, okay, the war is contained over there, you realize it's inspired people over here. And that's why we have the best Joint Terrorist Task Force around. That's why the FBI works so well with the NYPD here in New York. The FBI posted this on Sunday, an update. 2 subjects were arrested and remain in custody. FBI Joint Terrorist Task Force investigating the matter with our partners at the NYPD as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office from the Southern District of New York. Preliminary analysis confirms one of the devices ignited and deployed by the subject was an IED explosive. So that's what you worry about. That's why there's cameras in every corner. Not to find out what you're doing, what you're smoking, what you're selling, but they want to find out where the next terror attack. So you can sit there, and I've been in that room, and almost see every single block to see what develops. And if something happens, you can roll back on that block and then put it all together. And a lot of that technology is used in Iran. Why? Some of this, they use facial recognition. They don't use that in New York, but they use facial recognition in Iran. Why? Because they got it from China. China uses that on everybody in order to find out what everyone's up to and stop the next, they're paranoid, and stop the next revolution before it happens. People that are unhappy want more out of life and see the corruption in their government. So we'll see. Of course, the mayor comes out and blames white supremacists, but doesn't blame the terrorist and the Islamic extremist overseas, as usual. But that's what you get when you vote this mayor into office. You know, he's different from the average or the typical Democrat. When you go to mayor, it's not really ideological unless you're the Chicago mayor, which is just inept and political. But this guy goes out of his way to let you know that this guy is a socialist. This guy, as a Muslim, you wonder how extreme he is. He doesn't certainly entertain it, but man, I wish he would just flat out condemn it. You listen to The Brian Kilmeade Show, 1-866-408-7669, or write me at briankilmeade.com. I'll find out what's on your mind. And don't forget, you can see me on stage May 30th in Reno, Nevada, and of course, July 11th in Evansville, Indiana, streamed on Fox Nation, briankilmeade.com. So Daniel Turner has a different focus, and that is the world oil and gas prices. Daniel, as founder of the energy advocacy group Power the Future, what is your thought about what we're experiencing right now with the Strait of Hormuz essentially being non-trafficked?
Yeah, it's great to be on with you, Brian. And listening to Chris Wright, the Energy Secretary, he's absolutely spot on. This is not a supply issue, and markets don't like uncertainty. If you go back to why oil was at $100 a barrel for the Biden administration, it was because we didn't know if we would have supply in the future. You had Joe Biden saying we should put CEOs of oil and gas companies in jail for climate change. You had Interior Secretary Deb Haaland saying she wasn't going to have land leases because indigenous knowledge told her otherwise, right? So there was uncertainty in the Biden administration, but it was production. It was supply uncertainty. This is a transportation issue. And yes, they're worried about the Straits. Secretary Wright said that the first tanker got through. There are insurance issues as well. But oil dropped $15 a barrel already today, and that's a story that's worth talking about.
Where is it now? Where is it now, Dan? Where is it now?
I'm sorry?
Where is it right now?
It's now just at 100. I literally looked at my phone a second before we went live, and it was at 100 flat. But when oil markets opened at 6 p.m. Eastern last night, on Sunday night is when oil markets open, it hit 112. And so it's come down because even the markets are saying, okay, it's not that bad. We can calm down. And that will continue as long as stability continues to reign.
What about when that Strait, the president said, show some guts, get those tankers and freighters rolling through there. One rolled through. He wants other nations to do the same thing. Yeah. Is he right? Because he's also offering insurance.
You know, and there's a huge insurance issue. The United States made a brilliant move of saying the government will act as the insurer to provide financial guarantees for your cargo. I have a question. It's a little, you know, it's out of my expertise, but it's something that I've been thinking about since I woke up this morning. The countries that are really suffering the most are the production companies in that area. What's their role in getting the Straits? Dubai brags about its inside, ski resorts and the world's tallest building. What's Dubai doing? What is OAE doing? What is Kuwait doing? What is Saudi Arabia doing? So once again, it shows America has to rule the damn world, right? Everything. They look to us and they say, how come, you can't get this open? There's a lot of oil and gas wealth in that region, and every one of those countries are pointing to America saying, we need you. That is a good thing if you believe America is the ultimate force for good, but it also shows that, there's a dearth of leadership in the world, and thank God we have Donald Trump and not Kamala Harris in charge.
Daniel, as an energy expert, I'm sure you had a chance or would agree with this Wall Street Journal column that said how America's oil and gas dominance has weakened Iran, and essentially says, unlike during oil shocks in the 70s and the first Gulf War, the U.S. doesn't depend on the Middle East for oil. The vast majority of the oil the Americans consume is now produced in the U.S. and Canada. The exception is California because those idiots import 60% of their crude and 15% of its gasoline as a result of their climate change agenda. So still most California's crude imports come from South America. Americans will still see higher prices because of the global market. But we are flat out not as dependent, especially now working refining Venezuela's oil and gas because they can't.
Yeah. And this is a great point. Imagine being someone so naive and angry as Gavin Newsom, as saying, I have enough oil and gas here in my state that we could produce it cheaply for my residents, but he would rather shut that down and import oil and gas from the Bahamas because somehow he considers that to be green. So we have a lot of domestic oil and gas terrorists as well. And it's these blue state governors. We have enough natural gas in Pennsylvania to supply the world. And we have blue state governors that won't let it leave the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania because they try to shut down pipelines into New York, into Massachusetts, et cetera. So we have some domestic problems still as well.
You were the president that shut off fracking 6 months before the election last year. And and he didn't even know he did it. But this is what the challenges are. Iraq shut down their oil fields because he says of danger. Saudi Arabia rerouted around the Strait of Hormuz and halted operations at a key refinery. The UAE is scaling back production overall, and Qatar's natural gas refinery took a hit. So it's basically shut down for the first time in 20 plus years. So that's real. Yeah. Some of this is just what happens at war, and some of it is just fear. And that's what Iran wants. But we sunk their entire Navy. I'm not sure if they could mine it or not. and the launchers are down to 125 or below. So there might be some risk, but if we can insure it and then later escort it, we could get that going. Dan, what would it do if you got reports of dozens of ships going through the Strait today?
It would drop like that in a heartbeat. Oil prices would drop because the supply concerns and the transportation concerns would be assuaged. And I know that's what President Trump is concerned about. But also, I'll give the guy credit. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to pay high energy prices more than anyone else. But I like the fact that he is not conducting this operation on oil prices. And I feel like we may have done that in the past. And he's saying, yeah, look, this stinks. $100 barrel oil isn't great. But if you think I'm going to start using my military and my Navy to lower oil prices, you're crazy. We are using our military and our Navy to make sure we have no Islamic terrorist threat, not just in that region, but in the world. We had a guy inspired by the same networks that Iran funds throw an IED not far from where you're seated right now, right? Iran's Islamic reach is really, really vast. And I don't want to pay $100 barrel in oil, but if neutralizing that threat worldwide for future generations can be the price, then that's what we have to pay.
You mentioned Chris Wright, the Secretary of Energy. Here's what he said last night yesterday on Face the Nation, Cut 29.
How high do you think oil and gas are going to go?
They shouldn't go much higher than they are here because the world is very well supplied with oil. There's no energy shortage at all in the Western Hemisphere.
Right.
The United States is a net exporter of oil, a large net exporter of natural gas, but refineries in Asia and Europe are seeing an interruption from the normal crude flows. But there is massive energy stores around the world. What you're seeing is emotional reactions and fear that this is a long-term war. This is not a long-term war. It's a temporary movement.
And that's what he did. I think he did a very good job settling everything down. Dan, could you, for people not in the oil market, could you talk about how we could have plenty of oil, but yet we're not really affecting the global price? What about these global markets that we can only do our portion, but we're all in it together? Could you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, energy prices are a global commodity, just like the price of gold, just like the price of stocks, right? The same AT&T you're buying in different exchanges is the same price because it's a global interest. What we do in America impacts that greatly. And this is where sound oil and gas policy does create calm. Oil was at $60 a barrel for the last year because there was calm in the markets. There was financial calm, regulatory calm, right? So there was no jittering. Right now, there's a lot of concern. The best thing that we could do is obviously resolve the situation in the Straits of Hormuz, but open up oil and gas fields worldwide. You know who should be really petrified right now is Great Britain. They have a huge oil and gas field in the North that they've shut down for climate change. Now there are reports that they have 2 days of natural gas supply left. If you're a Brit, a proud Brit, how do you look at this and say this is an acceptable scenario because of climate change? Now I am petrified. I can't afford to heat my home and the Straits of Hormuz is dictating my life.
You know what they're doing?
What we need is every one of our allies to have supply.
You know what's happening in New York? Kathy Hochul's seeing what Cuomo did, shutting down that nuclear power plant, which they said they got to reopen in Indian Wells. And they're saying that the climate initiatives that they put in together is going to destroy the economy. A Democrat, this is all Democrat. They're realizing what they put in play was got them a big round of applause and everybody loved it. But there's no practicality to it at all, especially when natural gas burns clean. And yet they're running from it. So she's asking for a reprieve on that. Germany's asking for a reprieve on this. Do you believe even if Democrats were in charge of the country, they would understand that what they were pursuing was a lark and was just an idea, but has no practical future in this world? Do you think we're going to have to go back to it when they get in power?
That's the biggest fear, and that's why I spend a lot of my time on Capitol Hill trying to have codifying legislation that prohibits them from doing this again. Because look at what Joe Biden did to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. You have Chuck Schumer demanding that Trump tap it. Biden exhausted 300 million barrels to keep the midterms in 2022. Chuck Schumer says, how come you haven't filled it yet? How long does it take to fill up 300 million barrels when we only produce 13.6 million a day, right? If we put 100,000 barrels out of the supply, what would that do to prices? And 100,000 barrel a day, it would still take years to fill up the reserves. So when Democrats have power, they use this industry, they use every industry for their political advantage, and they don't care that they destroy it.
I hope that doctrine's done. That's what I hope, because I don't see anyone really running on it. And the other thing is, Dan, what Joe Biden did to keep oil prices down is cut a deal with the devil in Venezuela and then drained our oil reserves and said, look what I did. It's no big deal. Look at the capacity I'm drilling with. In reality, he was trying to kill America's oil and gas industry, wasn't he?
And it worked. That's the most nefarious thing about it. It worked. He wanted to take from the 2022 midterms the talking point of high gas prices. And he kept the Senate. And he got his judges confirmed, and he got his cabinet confirmed. So we can all say how evil it was, and how un-American it was, and it was. But was it crafty? That's biblical. It was as crafty and savvy and wicked as you could want any good politician to do. So kudos for him for destroying America, putting us at risk because he wanted to save the Senate. And then you have the gall of Chuck Schumer pretending like he wasn't part of this. So you really have to have great disdain for these people. Democrats, if you give them control again, they will make all of New York, all of America look like California and New York. So thank God we have at least President Trump in charge.
And right, by the way, the next governor of California will have to do what Kathy Hochul's doing, because what he's pledged, no gas cars, no gas car sales. It's just going to, it's unworkable, even for the craziest leftists there is. And there's a lot. We'll see. Dan Turner, thanks so much. Gas is around $100. Oil is around $100 a barrel. Hopefully it gets lower and we see some frigates go through the Strait. Thanks so much, sir.
Hopefully.
Back in a moment.
God bless. Thanks, Brian.
We just heard that reporting from our colleague Matthew Chance. We know that an Israeli military spokesperson was asked if Israel was preparing a large-scale ground invasion into Lebanon. He responded, all options remain on the table. I'm curious what you see as the next steps for Israel in all of this.
Good to be with you, Jessica. Let me just first comment on Matthew Chance's report, a very lengthy report, which somehow did not mention once one of the 220 rockets that Hezbollah has fired at northern Israel in the last 5 days. That has displaced thousands of people, wounded dozens, killed. If you don't do that, you have not done your job as a reporter. It looks like he
is reporting on the ground. Hang on. He is reporting on the ground about Lebanon, just to be fair. But I hear your point. I hear your point. I hear your point about how Israel is also being attacked.
We have a million people under fire from Hezbollah tonight. 1 million people. All right. Hezbollah is a branch of Iran.
So what Ambassador Oren is 100% right. Veteran, knows this inside and out. And, he's a tough guy. If you have to be prepared if you're going to interview him. But he's 100% right. Why do you think that Israel is in Lebanon? Hezbollah. Now, if Hezbollah didn't rocket again after they said they wouldn't, after they started hitting Iran, Hezbollah starts rocketing, and then Israel said, that's it. We're done with you. We're going to finish you off now. Done. We're done. And not only are you going to be done, Iran's going to be done financing you, we're going to kill all of you, or as many as humanly possible, because Lebanon has been unable or unwilling to finish you off themselves and take control of their own country. So to give a report and not say why Israel is in Lebanon or bombing out Lebanon's Hezbollah strongholds in Lebanon is giving half a report. Now, sometimes it cuts you down to 1:10, then they go to another reporter located in Israel. And that's part of it. If you want to break it up that way, here for the Hezbollah perspective is X, Y, and Z reporter. Here for the Israeli perspective is X, Y, and Z reporter. But that's not the case. We have Trey Yingst, for example, talking about what's happening with the Iranian hits, the Hezbollah hits, as well as what's happening with U.S. force strength. That's what Fox chooses to do. And then if the Iranian foreign minister is interviewed on American television, which is interesting, again, he rolls that in when he can. But he just feels that there's compelled to balance. Why people go out of the way to make Israel, they're trying, make Israel look bad. They loved when Hamas looked like the empathetic figures, even though they started the whole thing October 7th. But now you have the Arab states angry at Iran. Nobody's angry at Israel right now except Iran, which is a good thing. We are back, 1-866-408-7669. We'll take calls in about 15 minutes. But we have not forgotten about one of the hottest issues in America, especially what happened on Friday when Kristi Noem was removed and placed to the Shield of the Americas, which is going to look at Central and South America. She's no longer Homeland Security Secretary and nominated as Senator Markwayne Mullin. Part of the reason is some of these the crackdowns have produced some horrific results where you are actually picking up a lot of illegal immigrants, some of the worst of the worst, but for the most part, it seemed unorganized with no local support, and Kristi Noem's leadership was just non-existent. And there's mixed messages coming out of the White House where Stephen Miller's like cracked down on everybody, and Tom Homan said, that's not practical. I've done this for 30 years. It's not going to work that way. With us right now is Mark Morgan, former FBI agent who served as the chief of the U.S. Border Patrol, and he's acting commissioner of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Mark, welcome back.
Brian, it's great to be with you again.
I mean, we can't forget front and center, there's no DHS funding right now because they say they want massive changes to ICE. Now, if you could look at this from political, you're not into the political side, but they wanted Kristi Noem out. She's out. They wanted the end of roving patrols. Tom Homan says, I don't do that. They wanted body cameras. They have them. You could honestly say, if you're a Democrat, we achieved a lot. Let's fund the government, fund the DHS, but they're not. How much damage are they doing?
Well, a lot, especially to the signature issue. Look, let's take a look at this, Brian. The past year, there's a couple of things that are undeniable with respect to the interior enforcement on those that are here illegally. And it's what a broader coalition of conservative think tanks, we're calling phase one, is that you can make no mistake that they focused on those that are here illegally that have also committed crimes. And so you look at that past year, that there are fewer criminals in the country now than there was a year ago. Our city streets are safer now than a year ago because of that. But much more needs to be done. In fact, I think you and I were communicating a little bit. I just recently was asked, since Kristi Noem was removed, I was asked by a reporter, "Hey, Mark, so you think now the Trump administration are they gonna ratchet back, or is it going to be the status quo?" And I thought to myself, that's a false binary choice, Brian. The answer should be is we need to do more. But to your point, and to what Tom did in Minneapolis, the issue shouldn't be whether we're going to enforce immigration law. The question is, how are we going to do that? And I think when you have roving patrols, when you walk into parking lots of Home Depot, when you're sending thousands of troops to sanctuary cities uncoordinated, that's not the answer. And I think you're right. That's a large reason why Kristi Noem is not there.
So do you believe that ICE is unorganized? Do you believe that they're not given enough power to do their own thing? I know it's always going to be challenging in a sanctuary city because they have local police are not going to be cooperative. Have we in the past done well picking up illegal immigrants in good numbers in cities where the sanctuary cities? And what are we not doing now that we were doing then?
Yeah, Brian, that's it. I mean, it's funny. I think sometimes we make things more complicated than they are, especially when you put politics into some of your decision making. And you're right. Think about this. It doesn't matter whether it was a Republican or Democrat administration. ICE has been there for quite some time. And year after year, administration after administration, they've been removing illegal aliens from our country. So why is this? Why is all of this happening now? Some of it, let's be honest, some of it's politics because it's Trump, right? So anything Trump does, you're going to have resistance. But let's put that aside. And I think it goes back to what you said in the beginning. It's how we're doing that. Let me give you a quick example. So the FBI, after 9/11, the FBI has 56 field offices. Each field office developed a joint terrorism task force. And each of those task force had what we call supporting commands from state, locals, and other federal agencies. And the chain of command was very clear and went all the way up to the Department of Justice. Well, it's the same thing here. ICE has about 20, 25 field offices throughout the United States. ICE should be clear the leader in this. This is their statutory responsibility to conduct interior enforcement. State and local and other federal agencies should be supporting commands and a Homeland Security task force in each one of these offices that's really focused, leaders focused on all forms of those that are here illegally. And then that clear line goes all the way up to the Department of Homeland Security. So the system is already there. The foundation is already there. ICE should be leading it. And to your point, though, we just need to make sure that ICE not only has the resources to include logistics, but also there's a clear line of authority and decision making. I think those things are absent. I think logistics needs to be matured. I think there was a bifurcated chain of command and a line of authority that didn't make sense, that cut out some of the component heads as well as ICE. I think that can easily be fixed, and you can see the numbers actually expand.
And you think it, get the worst of the worst. We got it. Everyone agrees on that, let's say, in words anyway. But you say that shouldn't stop us from picking up people that continue to not show up for their hearings and overstay their visas. They got to be picked up too.
Yeah, Brian, that's exactly right. And look, I get this phase one the first year, going after the worst of the worst. Again, criminals are gone, our city seats are safe. That's great. But that's why I'm part of a new group called the Coalition of Mass Deportations, because it goes to your point that you just mentioned. Look, those that are in the country illegally and also criminals, Brian, that's actually a subset. That's a small subset. Let's just, for sake of argument, there's about 20 million illegal aliens in the country. Well, you go after all the criminals that are also here illegally. I don't know, what do you got left? About 19 million? So we can't, and here's what's very important. If we're going to stop the flow of illegal immigration, de-incentivize it, we have to stop treating the package of immigration laws like a buffet, meaning we selectively enforce them based on our political ideology or personal political beliefs. And especially we have to stop being influenced by special interest groups. To your point, Brian, right now, just to give you a couple of examples, there's 1.5 million illegal aliens that have been provided more due process than any country would provide any illegal alien on the face of the planet, and a judge has ordered them removed. That has to be a priority. We have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of visa overstays. That has to be priority. And the last thing that we have to do, we have to aggressively go after U.S. employers who are knowingly hiring illegal aliens so they can pay them cheap wages and literally marginalize an already marginalized U.S.-born workforce.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, too. Now, you never, Mark, had to talk about this with a sealed border. Because as soon as we talked about this, with the border sealed, then what? Well, now you've sealed the border. Then what? You have an opportunity now to change a lot of the things that we both agree on, whether it's HB1 visas or what do we do with people that are here 20 years plus. Maybe we get them a sponsorship. Maybe they get a sponsorship if they get one from their employer that's been there, and they never get citizenship, but maybe they get long-term work visas. Is there something for the so-called dreamers? I mean, is it time now to do something? Because not everything is ICE, pro-ICE, anti-ICE. There's other stuff that we could do, couldn't we?
Yeah, I think that's right. But you know what? I'll use Chuck Schumer's words. And I think it was 2008 or 2009 at Georgetown University. He said a statement, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, look, we're never going to get to some of the things you're talking about until we show America that we're serious about stopping illegal immigration and securing the border, right? So that was Chuck Schumer back in 2008, 2009. And that's to your point, Brian. And so I think what we have to do first is we have to make sure that our border is completely secure. Now, it is the most secure we've had. In fact, when I was commissioner, I used to say that. I think it's more secure now under Trump too, but it's still not 100% secure. The cartels are still alive and well. The people are still coming to the border illegally. So we have more to do there. But more importantly, though, just as importantly, we have to make sure that we're enforcing the immigration laws. Meaning, like tomorrow, if a Democratic administration was in the White House, well, what would they do? They would turn on catch and release again. So it wouldn't be about whether the border's secure or not. They would just come to our ports of entry.
That's why we got to do it. That's what we got to
just let them in. So before I think we start having those discussions you talked about, we have to make sure the border's secure. We have to stop illegal immigration, and then we have to enforce immigration laws. The cartels and immigrants have to know that if they come, they're not going to be released in the country.
Well, being that we don't have the mess in Mexico, does it show that they have been reinforcing their southern border?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And Brian, this is another great point that we haven't been talking enough about. And I'm glad you brought it up. Is that one of the things, we called it the Trump effect, and Trump won, is that, and I was there, I was lucky enough to be on the front lines. We saw Mexico do more than they've had in their entire existence, as far as not only supporting programs like the Remain in Mexico program, but more than that, they were increasing their interior enforcement. And to your point, they were increasing security on their southern border with Guatemala. it just makes sense, right? So we saw the flow go. As soon as the Biden administration got on, all that went away, and we saw the disaster that happened. And so now we're seeing that again. We're seeing countries like Mexico and others in the Western Hemisphere step up and join this as the regional crisis it is. So yeah, you're seeing, again, Mexico is supporting the Remain in Mexico program again. You're seeing increased interior enforcement. And the fact they just went after, a major cartel leader is it's very significant that there's a shift. Now I will say they would have never done that without the U.S. support.
Right. And also Ecuador too. They're moving on the cartels in Ecuador. And then there was a meeting in America at Doral with some of these Americas. I think 13 states came to the table. But Mark, doesn't this get you angry? You probably know the answer to this. That Mayorkas and everyone told us, well, it's about climate change. It's about refugees. There's nothing we could do about it. People coming to our border. We got to be able to give them some type of refugee status because this is migration. This is global migration. We can't control it. A flat out lie. And then Kamala Harris was told, control the border, come up with a policy. And she said, I'm going to go to the root causes, and never went to the border one time because she was forced to. What does that tell you? I mean, this is utter failure and flat out lying.
Yeah, Brian, look, you're absolutely right. And that's why the past, during the Biden administration, you and I talked many times, I was angry because I saw the intentionality of what was going on. They literally took the most secure border we had and they intentionally unsecured it. Remember the press secretary, one comment, she said, well, Mark, I mean, she wasn't talking to me, she was talking to Mary. She says, it's not like they literally just walked across the border. I mean, I just started cracking up. It was like mostly peaceful protests as the city's burning behind him. It was a joke, right? And one of the things that really got to me, and this is the key point, and we've got to make sure this administration doesn't fall into that, is one of the things that got me with Secretary Mayorkas is he looked at the Constitution, in my opinion, as it didn't matter, especially the three separate but co-equal branches of government. He looked at the laws that were passed by the legislative branch, by Congress, as nothing more than a mere advisory opinion, right? And he got to choose whether he was going to enforce the law on whether he liked it or not. We can't do that. It literally erodes the authority of Congress and puts additional authorities in the executive branch that doesn't exist. And that's another reason why we have to make sure as the executive branch, we support, we have to enforce all the immigration laws. We can't pick and choose which ones we enforce.
But you see what happened because of the responsibility of our DHS secretary, whether she was listening to people or not, I don't care. But you took a issue that was clearly you and Republicans are in the right for, and you gave it to Democrats who said two people died. These guys, ICE is ill-trained. They're going out and just grabbing Americans off the street that look Hispanic. And some of them, the roving patrols going to Home Depot saying, show me your papers. That's not really what you guys should be doing. Tom Homan says, well, I'm not doing that. But that wasn't his call. Now he's back in charge. If Mark Morgan was back in charge, he's doing it. But the Republicans temporarily gave the issue back to Democrats and fundamentally hurt the country.
100% agree, Brian. I couldn't have said it better myself. Here's what's very important, though, is that we should not be having a discussion whether we're going to enforce the law. That shouldn't be a discussion. It shouldn't be a discussion whether we're going to go after the 1.5 million with orders removal or the 100,000 visa overstays or go after employees that are knowingly hiring illegal aliens. That shouldn't be a question. But what we should be asking is, how do we go about doing that? That's what you just described. That was a failure in Minneapolis. That's what gave this issue. There was a signature issue that I think this is one of the main reasons why President Trump is back in the White House. And we literally, as you said, agree 100%, we gave the issue to the Democrats. So we've got a little bit of hole to go in because what we're talking about, this coalition of mass deportation, we're like, hey, we got to ramp up. We got to move to phase 2 where we're opening the aperture up and we're going after much more than just criminals. But how we do that, Brian, is going to be critical.
Absolutely. And you know what? Let me ask you just real quick, we're up against it, but is ICE getting proper training? I've never been to the academy. Are you thinking that we're in a rush to get them out? Being the, signups were great, people were recruited. Do you think that the training could be modified a little?
Brian, another great question. Look, one of my last tours of the FBI was assistant director of Quantico. I was responsible for training every single new agent and employee that the FBI had. Here's what I can say. You never get enough training. Never. And so when I start hearing that, granted, I don't know all the details now, but there's been some conflicting stories. It seems like they're reducing training and trying to just push them out the door faster. Brian, I'm telling you, that's not the answer. That's not a good look.
Yep. And puts those ice ages in danger too.
It does.
Yep. And then you got to put the new, by the way, both who were involved in the controversial incidents with the death of those two protesters were experienced, by the way. They weren't just out of the academy. They were very experienced.
Which Brian, real quick, I know we're up against hardline, but which shows you that training, it's not a fire and forget. Like when you leave the academy, that's baseline. You need constant training throughout your career, and you just represented that.
Yeah, and plus, if people are screaming at me all day, spitting in my face, you have a certain fuse, even if you train me, and unless
Amen.
It's tough. Mark Morgan, great. It was great seeing you again. Great to get your perspective on this hot issue as we're about to get a new DHS secretary. Mark Morgan, thanks so much. Back in a moment. This is what gives me hope. And I say it over and over again, even though he doesn't come on the show, and I don't know why, Bill Maher. I want you to listen to what he said over the weekend, because he knows, like you and I know, that Iran's been a problem since 1979. He's older than us, right? And older than me, about 10 years. And he can't believe that every Democrat says this is an unnecessary war. Cut 24.
I just don't get what liberals don't get about liberation. I see so much happiness. I see it in Venezuela. I see it here in Iran. Could we skip the part where we talk about, they had so many different reasons for going to war, regime change, and we got to get rid of the nukes, and they were supporters of terrorism. It's all of it. How about this? This was a fascist theocracy, and nothing in the Middle East was ever going to get better while they were still there f***ing everything up.
So perfect. Exactly. And that's why we're all caught in. Give me the objective. Yeah, I'll give you the objective to oust the regime. Why? Well, who's next? We'll have a say in it. What do you mean you have a say in it? We'll have a say in it because we don't have to go back there. I don't want the next guy to go back there. I want to tell you something. When Trump's done with this operation, Iran is not going to be a problem for the next 2 or 3 years. But what he's thinking about is the next guy. And he's saying, I'm the only one who would have done this. I'm the only one that would have done this. Nobody else would do this. And that's why he did it. That's called leadership. I don't have any political gain. The economy is going to drive the midterms. I'm willing to take a hit in the economy to do the right thing. I'll take a hit in the polls to do the right thing. Isn't that what a leader's supposed to do?